was summer 2015 when my friends and I were planning a camping trip. We were bad procrastinators, so the process was really slow. The planning conversation fizzled out and I thought the plan was scrapped. But one day out of the blue, Carly, who initially brought up the idea of planning a camping trip, messaged the group chat saying that the campsite was officially booked and that we would be leaving the next day. I couldn't have been more unprepared for this trip. Neither did I have any of the camping gear needed or booked off time at work. I accepted I wouldn't be able to give work such a short notice and messaged them back that I'd have to miss out on this one. I was green with envy and upset with Carly's lack of communication. The other two in the group, Jack and Sarah, were always last-minute type people. Whether it was their relaxed nature or laziness, I never really knew. But I suppose that's why they hit it off. Carly, I think, intentionally didn't want me there because of a previous argument that I thought we moved on from, but I suppose not. I ended up staying in the city. It was boring, and the FOMO was real, but I tried to make the most of it and not feel bad for myself. 2 days into what would have been a 5-day trip, I get a call from the police station, saying that they wanted me to come in for some questioning. As I walked there, my head was drowning in ideas. Had I broken any laws? Have I been framed? Never did the thought cross my mind that I'd be questioned if Carly had shown any violent tendencies in the past, because she's now missing and the bodies of Jack and Sarah were found burnt in the tent at their campsite. The morgue asked me to identify their bodies. They almost look like different people in my friend's burned clothes. Maybe that was just my mind not coping, but I thought I was being punked. My stomach felt hollow and I felt myself wanting to puke. My hands were shaking and I couldn't process anything the police was saying to me. All I could think about was Carly. The report says that smoke was seen by a helicopter, and that when help arrived, all that was seen was a smothered campsite with a burnt down tent and 2 burned corpses inside. There was no other sign of anyone else being there. Could she have done this? Why would she have? Sure, there were times when Carly was maybe interested in Jack, but she said she'd lost interest. And she was glad that him and Sarah got together. And even if that was a lie, I feel like I knew her well enough to say that she's not the type to let jealousy overcome her to the point of committing a double homicide. I kept thinking that things might have turned out differently if I had been there. All I could hope is that wherever Carly was, that she was okay. Time went on. There was nothing I could do except try and keep up with it. I started therapy shortly after that, and have been going ever since. It's helped me cope with it a bit, but I'll always be haunted of the image of what happened to poor Jack and Sarah. I found myself seeing Carly everywhere I looked. It was as if she was haunting me. I struggled for a long time with the fact that we never knew what happened to her. It wasn't until 2 years later that on the news that her mutilated body was found locked in a cage in the mountains a short walk outside the campsite. It was in the middle of the first night. We were sitting around the fire having some beers. I had this weird guttural feeling lurking. I thought it was guilt. I didn't mean to cut Charlotte out of the plans like that. I had no ill intentions. I guess I was just excited to get going that I hadn't really kept everyone else in the loop. We sat around the fire for a little longer before turning in. As I lay there staring up at the ceiling of my tent, I started feeling uneasy. If Charlotte were here, we would have shared a tent. Without her, there was nobody to tell me I had nothing to be afraid of. Every time the bushes brushed against the tent or the wind rustled it, I found myself in a fetal position. By the time I finally fell asleep, must have been 2 a.m. It didn't last long. I woke up to the sound of scratching and fire crackling and a foul smell following it, like burnt leather. I sat up quickly but quietly. I reached out the open tent, but I was paralyzed with fear. There's nothing to be afraid of, I repeated to myself. There's nothing to be afraid of. I unzipped the door to the tent and saw Jack and Sarah's tent had been completely engulfed in flames. Sarah! I jumped out of the tent and towards theirs, and before I made it across, I was hit in the back of the head and knocked unconscious. When I came to, my vision was blurred with tears, but I saw the flames roaring. My hands were tied and I was being dragged across the ground, cutting up my back and my legs. I tried to talk, but my head was throbbing. I couldn't make sense of anything. Please, just let me go. It was pitch black, and I couldn't keep track of where we were going. We were at least far enough now that I couldn't see or hear the fire. Maybe they got out. They'll find me, I told myself in a fruitless effort to calm me down. My eyes were starting to adapt to the darkness, and I could see that I was being dragged by a big man with scratches up his back like something fought back. My anxiety was overwhelming me, and I could feel my breaths becoming shorter and panicked. I started sobbing uncontrollably. Please, please, you don't have to do this, just let me go, please. He stopped and swung his bat at me, knocking me unconscious again. I woke up naked, covered in blood, and tied up inside a cage. I was so delirious I couldn't even cry anymore. The man wasn't anywhere to be seen, but I could hear what sounded like knives sharpening. The only thought that came to my mind was maybe it was good that Charlotte couldn't come. I don't know about you, but growing up as a teen, 7-Eleven is a must and a common place for junior high and the high school crowd. 7-Eleven can be a very sketchy place, especially at night. It's full of people who can't sleep, people who are on substances, along with those who have bad intentions. When you are younger, it doesn't seem like anything bad or scary will happen. It was like you were invincible. I had my best friend Emily over that night, and like any teens, the time will hit around 3 a.m. and you will crave a Slurpee or an overpriced bag of chips. We decided to walk 3 minutes to the closest convenience store, 7-Eleven. I had never had any problems with this location, but that changed quickly. As we walked the quiet streets, the glowing of the 7-Eleven illuminated the area around it, and we were drawn to it like moths to a flame. There was one person behind the counter when we entered. We headed straight for the Slurpee machine, and I remember getting cream soda. And Emily got a mix of everything we called swamp water. As we were walking the chip aisle, we noticed a man with a baseball cap on. He was peering at us from under his hat, but you can tell his eyes never left us, even if he was just looking down at our shoes. At first he kept his distance, but as time went on, he inched closer and closer until he was standing next to us, trying to look busy touching all of the bags of chips. We grabbed some Sun Chips and headed towards the counter. You might think this man would have backed off as we moved towards the counter, but he stood right behind us the whole time. The cashier didn't notice, or maybe he didn't care, but men don't see dangerous threats or things like young girls start to develop to survive. I paid, and me and Emily made our way to the door. Emily had always been an outspoken person, and I knew the man was getting a little too comfortable, and neither of us wanted him to follow us home. Before I could open the door, Emily turned around and said really loud, "Can I help you?" The man who was standing face to face with Emily looked shocked, and his face had gone red. All eyes were on him at this point. I said, "Can I help you?" "No? Then stop following us, or I'll ask the man behind the counter to call the police and we'll call them too." The man said nothing, but his eyes had shifted. He now looked angry, and all the emotion had faded, and now he looked as though he was about to do something bad to us. I wanted to call my mom, but I was worried that she would be mad that we went out at 3 a.m., so instead we turned around and walked out the door. We looked back multiple times to make sure that he was still in the 7-Eleven till we couldn't see it anymore. The whole walk back, we talked about the man and walked as fast as we could. We were maybe 1 minute away from my house when we heard footsteps running towards us. Our heads instantly snapped to see where the footsteps were running from when we saw the man from the 7-Eleven. Without hesitation, we started to book it. I started to scream, hoping someone would come outside and see and help us. We ran the fastest we have ever gone, and at this moment, my mom called me. I was never as happy to see my mom calling me as I was in that moment. When I picked up the phone, I heard her asking questions while we were still running, and I knew she was asking where we were, but all she heard was, "Mom, help, we're being chased. Open the door, get Dad. We're almost home, please." As we inched towards the house, my mom and Dad were running outside. My dad had a knife and my mom had a baseball bat. We ran behind my mom and watched as the man stopped and kept his distance. My dad started walking towards him, and the man ran, but not before saying, "If I see you out at night again, you won't make it home." Emily and I cried a lot once we got inside. I didn't get yelled at, but instead just hugged. I never went to 7-Eleven at night again in fear I'd see the man again. My dad and I encountered Bigfoot, or so I thought. My dad is a huge hunter and sometimes likes to invite me along. I've never fully understood killing deer or moose, but sometimes I went because it meant a day off of school and a fun car trip with a lot, and I mean a lot, of beef jerky and chips. One day in the middle of July, my dad asked if I wanted to go hunting with him on the weekend. For some reason, I agreed. Maybe it was that I was in need of my beef jerky fix. That weekend, we packed and set off. The car ride was around 3 hours. My dad had a favorite spot. He even had this cool little base in a tree so he could be high up and see miles. But I liked it because I felt safe. Not much could get up the tree unless it was possibly a bear. I've seen videos on that. Once we arrived, we set up and headed out into the woods towards our post. I usually didn't pay attention enough to the woods or the path we always took, but that day I remembered how quiet the forest was around me. Something felt as though we should have turned around. I think my dad felt it too, because at one point he stopped and motioned for me to stop moving and to be quiet. He stood there surveying the area around us, but eventually started moving once again. We got to the post and started to climb. Since it was so quiet, it still felt as though it was just me and my dad there. You could take the saying, if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? And I can say at that moment you'd hear it for miles. You could drop a pin and hear it land on a leaf. It was that quiet. It wasn't even 10 minutes of us sitting there when a huge snap came from right behind us. Both of our heads snapped in the direction, and my dad pulled out his scope and started to look in that direction. I won't lie to you, I was scared. It was like a real-life jump scare. My dad was silent this whole time, probably debating if this was our first catch of the day or if we could be in danger. After a few moments, my dad quietly said, "Don't move. It could be a bear, but this doesn't look like any bear I've ever seen." I wanted to ask him what he meant, but I knew if I opened my mouth, no words were going to come out. The twig snapping sound kept getting closer and louder as it crept closer to where the tree was. My eyes stayed fixed on where the sound was coming from, and that's when I saw it. It was huge and hairy. It kept switching from walking on 2 legs to all 4s. It was a dark brown or black color, but its feet and hands looked like it could have been just skin, no hair. I knew my dad also saw it because he kept his gun pointed at it and never lost sight of it. This whole time I don't believe that it saw us, but I always wondered what if it had seen me and my dad. Would it have attacked us or just kept going? It took maybe 20 minutes till we couldn't see it anymore, and the quiet forest wasn't quiet anymore. Birds and bugs had returned to fill the empty space with sound. On the car ride home, I tried to talk to my dad about it, but he just said, "Enough, never bring up what we saw here today." It's been 5 years, and we've never talked about it, but my dad never went back to that spot and found a different hunting area in the complete opposite direction. My question is, did I see Bigfoot? It was around June when me and my friends decided we wanted to plan a week-long camping trip. We have done camping trips before, but we thought it would be fun to rent an Airbnb cabin in an area we had never been to. Our group consisted of 4 of us: Kyle, CJ, Ginny, and myself. We all met in junior high and have been inseparable since. We had the option to choose from 2 Airbnbs, but we decided on the cheaper option, which would cost us $100 a night. But since there was 4 of us, we were going to split the cost. From the description, it said it was a 3-bedroom cabin with 1 bathroom, lakefront, with a huge yard area surrounded by trees. It did say bears had been seen in the area as a warning, but we thought it was perfect for the price. We all packed light, bringing only essentials like hygiene products, clothes, bathing suits, a few pool inflatables, and some food and drinks. Since we knew we wouldn't have Wi-Fi either, we thought it would be perfect time to reconnect with each other and nature, so we only brought our phones. We all took 1 car thinking it would be an easier ride and cheaper on gas, considering it was a 3-hour drive. Eventually, after 3 bathroom stops, we made it to the cabin. It was sunny, quiet, minus a few loons that could be heard on the water, almost like they were calling us to the calm, cool lake water. The grass that surrounded the cabin was greener than anything I had ever seen. We all unpacked. CJ and I carried food and drinks, while the girls brought our personal bags in. On the front door, a note was left attached. Kylie read it to us as we put the beers and food into the fridge. "Hello, party of 4. I hope the drive wasn't bad. Welcome to the cabin. I trust you all, but I would like to say that there are a few rules. It is very important to follow these rules. If you don't, there may be unfortunate consequences and injury. Rule 1. Make sure to lock the car doors. There have been incidents of hikers stealing. Number 2. Pick up any garbage that is yours. Please don't litter. Number 3. Never go swimming alone. Number 4. If you want to go on a hike or a walk, do not take the path that is behind the cabin near the shed. Number 5. Do not go near the shed, and do not go into the shed. Number 6. If you see a bear, or you think there may be a bear, remain inside and call the number on the bottom of this note. Number 7. Never, under any circumstances, leave the cabin after nightfall, and never go swimming at night. This is very important. Nothing to worry about. I hope you have a great vacation, and remember the rules. Talk soon, Chester." I got a weird feeling reading the letter, and curiosity was running rapid to what was in the shed, but I didn't intend to find out. We spent the whole day in the water, and indulged in margaritas and beers. As I soaked up the sun and worked on my tan, I noticed Ginny and CJ running off in the direction of the shed. It should be mentioned that Ginny and CJ have had an on and off thing for years, but never made it official. Maybe it was the sense of excitement, or that they didn't want to settle down. Instantly remembering the letter and called for them. "Hey, guys, we aren't allowed over there." CJ turned back, still giggling with Ginny. "Says who? That stupid note? Don't spoil my fun. No one is here to tell us no." Before I could try to pursue them, they had disappeared into the path behind the shed. Kylie and I just stared at each other. Well, we've been here for not even 2 hours, and they're already breaking the rules. I'm sure it'll be fine. They should be back before the sun goes down. A few hours passed with me and Kylie trying to pass time while waiting, and as time grew closer to around 10:30 p.m. They should be back by now. Should we go try and find them? I knew Kylie was getting worried, but so was I. I knew I couldn't panic for her sake. No, they should be back any time now. They are probably fooling around in the woods. You know those two can't keep their hands off each other, but Ginny always follows the rules and is responsible. Have you tried calling them again? Service was very spotty, so it was rare that the call actually went through. Kylie just stared out the window with nothing in sight besides the shed and the path that was getting darker and darker by the minute. The shed was made out of this wood that looked like it had been weathered and had been sitting there for a long time. It had turned almost a gray color to it, as if it had been wet and placed in the sun. There was one window that was visible from the cabin, and 2 large doors that were locked by a padlock. It didn't have a good vibe to it, and even if it wasn't a part of the rules, I wouldn't be caught dead near it. Like human nature, I had to relieve my bladder, and as I made my way to the bathroom, Kylie stayed glued to the window. I'm a person who overthinks, and I was panicking. It didn't help that the rules made me feel off, and here my friends were, breaking the rules already. I splashed cold water on my face. The silence was broken by my name being called. "Jordan? Jordan." Something about Kylie's tone didn't feel right. "Are they back?" As I made my way to see what she was looking at, I could see Kylie standing there. Her face was pale. It looked like she was going to pass out or be sick. Her eyes remained glued on something on the other side of the window. As I inched toward the window to see what she was looking at, my eyes met what she was looking at. Like a moth drawn to a flame, my eyes were glued on the shed that now had a light on, and it was visible through the window. The light seeped through the boards of the little shack. Ginny and CJ must... Before I could finish the sentence, Kylie cut me off and said it wasn't them. I was so confused on what she meant until she said, "I saw someone in the window of the shed and it wasn't either of them. It was dark, but whoever or whatever that is, it didn't look right." Her eyes were still glued on the shed, as if she was too afraid to look away. My first thought was, maybe it was a hiker that got lost and needed a place to stay until morning. But even if that was the case, how would they get past the padlock? At that moment, I realized that the padlock that had been on the doors was now lying on the grass. I could see it. It wasn't broken, but instead it had been unlocked. My stomach was twisting in knots, and I wasn't sure if Kylie had noticed the lock on the shed now being on the ground. But before I could ask her, a bang came from the side door that faced the lake. We jumped, and my first instinct was to hit the floor and pulled Kylie down with me. We crawled our way to be able to see the sliding door, and as we inched closer, the pounding sound on the door became louder and more aggressive. It sounded like the door was trying to be forced open, even though I had locked it when we came inside. Our eyes slowly peeked around the counter. At the door, a figure was thrashing around because of how this person was acting. I didn't notice the blood that was being left on the glass door. As my adrenaline started to rise, I realized it was Ginny at the door. She was alone and had blood on her. Without hesitation, I jumped up and ran towards the door. As I unlocked it and opened it, Ginny collapsed inside while sobbing and screaming, "Close the door! Close the door!" Kylie and I began asking questions as we were checking to see if it was her blood and where it was coming from. On the side of her ribs there was 3 large gouges that seemed to be losing blood fast. You know humans have a lot of blood, but you don't realize how much a human body actually has until it's flowing out right in front of you. After a series of questions, the only thing she could say was, "It got CJ. We were running, and he was holding my hand until it grabbed him, and his hand slipped out of mine. His screams, I ran, I left him. The doors. It wasn't human, the doors, the doors." I felt like I went into fight or flight mode. I ran to all the doors and made sure they were locked, turned off the lights, grabbed a knife from the kitchen, and made sure I had my phone. Since there was glass all around us, something in me told me to get everybody into the bathroom. The bathroom had one window that was really high up. You couldn't see in from outside, since it had to have been 7 feet off the ground, but from inside, I could stand on the edge of the tub and see out. I picked up Ginny and Kylie followed behind until she stopped and ran back to the window in the kitchen. I wanted to go get Kylie, but I knew I couldn't leave Ginny alone since she was going in and out of consciousness, and I was applying pressure to the wounds. After what felt like minutes, but in reality it was only 30 seconds, Kylie crawled into the bathroom, and I could see tears streaming down her face that was being illuminated by the moonlight that was coming through the small window. I opened my mouth to ask what she saw, but before any words could come out, her finger slowly raised to her mouth, as if telling me to be quiet. Still on the floor, I could see her shaking hand slowly turning the doorknob and very slowly starting to close the bathroom door. The lock sounded like it was extremely loud, even though in reality it was most likely very quiet. Kylie slowly turned around and placed her back against the door and stared me in the eyes. Something about her expression told me that we were trapped and had no way of getting out. As I stared at her, I still hadn't realized that she had a pen and paper in her hand, along with a blanket from the couch. She began to write, and when she turned the paper, the words, "It isn't human. We need to block the window. It will see in. It is not a person." The pit in my stomach dropped, and the only words I seemed to mouth was, "Is it a bear?" My heart raced as she began to write again. This time, I knew what she was going to say. As she turned the paper, she slid the blanket over to me. "It is not a bear. It is tall and doesn't look right. Cover the window now." I slowly grabbed the blanket and slowly crawled onto the edge of the bathtub. And I slowly stood up. I could see out the window, and as my eyes looked over the edge of the frame, I was eye to eye with it. The best way I could describe its eyes was goat-like. Its pupils weren't circles, but thick vertical lines. They looked dead, as if there was nothing behind them. It looked bald, with a few strands of hair growing from random spots next to open flesh that was spotty all over its scalp, as if it was picking away its own flesh. I was frozen, and clearly Kylie could see it too, because I heard her breathing stop as if she was trying to hold her breath. As it stared into the bathroom, its gaze was broken by its head snapping towards the path near the shed. The way it turned its head wasn't normal. The speed at which it turned its head should have snapped it. It was unnatural. It moved as if every movement was a glitch, like its body parts were not moving or working together. It was unnaturally skinny, and it was extremely tall. It scurried towards the woods, constantly shifting its head as if it was listening for any type of sound to follow. It vanished into the bush. Knowing I wouldn't have another chance again, I quickly put the blanket over the window so nothing could see in. Our phones didn't have any service, so we sat there till the sun came up. It was agony. Every small noise had us fearing it had come back for us. Eventually we saw sunlight appear under the bathroom door. None of us wanted to get up, and we didn't move until around 2 p.m. When we eventually came out of the bathroom, we made our way to the kitchen. Kylie got service and called for help. And as I walked to go look out the windows, I saw something taped to the window from the outside. On the paper was written, "You should have listened to the rules. I hope you enjoyed your stay. Have a good rest of your summer. Sincerely, Chester." Some people say that the open road is all the therapy a person needs. I was done with being around people, done with meds to cope with grief, just done in general. I replayed the horrific scene too many times in my head. Nothing would ever bring my little sister back. I just had to accept that she was gone and it wasn't anyone's fault. No one to blame, no matter how much I wanted to. She was only 6. The driver didn't see her dart out between the cars, and by the time they did, it was too late. So I got a job for a trucking company, to be alone and not think anymore. And yeah, I've heard my fair share of highway horrors, but some sounded so far-fetched I figured they were just trying to rattle me. It wasn't until tonight that I had realized just how crazy it can be. I was on the Trans-Canada Highway headed to Toronto, Ontario from Kamloops, BC, so about a 20-hour drive. It was the middle of July, the air was dry and the wind was hot. It gets really hot in the truck's cabin, and I wasn't able to sleep very much because of it. Couldn't bear staring at the roof with just my thoughts. I figured it best just to keep driving. The roads were quiet and open, and I would get to Toronto earlier in the day than initially expected. I saw no flaw in my plan. I went into the store and grabbed myself a coffee and a couple Red Bulls and hit the road. It was peaceful at first. With the windows down, you can smell the trees and see the beautiful mountains. The further I got, the more tired I started to feel. The next stop wasn't for a while, but I figured if necessary I could always just rest my eyes for a little while on the shoulder of the highway. I can feel my head bobbing and my eyes are getting heavy. It's about 3 a.m. now. It's pitch black out, and I've been on the road for over 12 hours. I thought I saw someone or something move on the side of the road. Maybe a deer or some wild animal. I turned on my high beams looking ahead for something crossing, and just at the edge of my headlights, I see a little girl run out into the street. I slammed on my brakes and jumped out of the rig, but there was nothing there. No blood, no body, no dent in the grill. I had to hurry and get to the next rest station. Finally, just on the horizon, I could see the lights at the rest station up ahead. I pulled in and rested for the night. I slept in that morning, woke up around 12:45, still in shock of what I had seen last night, or what I thought I saw. I got back on the road and arrived in Toronto later that afternoon. As the trailer was being unloaded, I decided to call my dad and tell him about the crazy night I had. I walked out in front of the truck, and as the phone was ringing, I saw a little bit of hair stuck in the grill. After saving up for a road trip on a hot July day, me, Shelley, Connor, and Sebastian decided to go on a crew road trip, wherever the road went. That was until we hit Gavel town. I realized we were running low on gas when we hit Gavel town, and there was a gas station. A man dressed up in cowboy boots and a hat with blue overalls saying, "Well, howdy partner, looking for some Gavel gas to fill her up?" I checked the bank account and said, "How much was the gas?" 99 cents per liter. The man said. "Name's Roy, by the way." We all looked at each other shocked. "You're messing with us," Connor said. "How much is gas where you're from?" Roy asked. I told him $1.73 a liter. "Well, we get it straight from the refinery over here. None of this outsourcing baloney you city folks love." We filled up, paid Roy, and wished him well. "By the way, it's getting dark. Make sure you check in a motel here," Roy told us before we left. We checked in the motel. It was old, run down, barren looking, and abandoned. I rang the bell. Nothing. Then after my friend piped up, "Hello? Anyone here?" An old frail man walked up. This man looked so old he looked at least 100 years old. "Room 107, here's your key," the man said with a very raspy tone, like the tone of death walking over him. Sebastian reluctantly took the key, and the man had an iron grip. We got into our rooms and it smelled stank, but it was stable. As the sun drove down, Sebastian looked pale. At the screen on his phone was a Gavel town and the news headline reading, 120 dead after gas explosion at Gavel town plant. Workers found burned and charred all over. "I was alive when that happened," the old man said. "The bodies recovered looked like you cremated them halfway then stopped. My friend Joe worked at the plant. He had a 5-inch blade lodged right into his eye and head. He was never the same since. Ever since that day, this town has been cursed. Monsters and freaks come out at night." We all laughed until we realized this man's expression was dead serious, and there was no joke in his raspy voice. He then left the room. That night we heard Shelley scream and then suddenly stopped with a few loud bangs. I pulled out my pistol ready to shoot whomever got into the bathroom that she was in, and give him what for. I opened the door and Shelley was unrecognizable in a puddle of blood with flesh and bones scattered across the floor as if she got butchered. Her head was decapitated and her face smashed in. I pointed my gun to the shower, cocked and loaded, and pulled the curtain to see a man laughing with blood dripping and metal hinge slammed into his right eye. I didn't hesitate and shot him 5 times in the back. The sound of gunshots alerted Connor and Sebastian, and I ordered them to get the hell out of this room. When they evacuated, I took it and locked the door. No sign of the old man. I checked my phone. No data. Shit, I stated disappointedly. I still dialed 911 hoping an operator would pick up. There was a static reception with a weird radio sound. The white noise was unbearable until a growling voice boomed, "Eat, gas, hurt." Then the call ended. Connor stared at the window and Sebastian slammed him in the back in a friendly manner, saying, "Staring at the wilderness, eh?" "No. A girl in white," replied Connor. "Mate, have you been taking acid again?" asked Sebastian. "No," replied Connor. "All right, Joker, I know you probably did some hallucinogenic drug to be tripping. There was no girl in..." He was interrupted by a figure of white peering right through the glass, just standing, watching. As I gather my stuff to leave, I hear the sound of grunting breaths. "Connor, stop messing with us." "It wasn't me," Connor said. "Connor's been tripping on acid again," Sebastian chimed in jokingly. "Shut the hell up, Sebastian," replied Connor. "Just 'cause she left you for some pimp doesn't give you an excuse to simp for some mysterious stranger that is probably some goddamn demon trying to drag you to be the devil's dog," said Sebastian angrily. "Guys, enough," I shouted. Then the man with the shard in his right eye grabbed me with his cold hands. Sebastian jumped and stabbed him right in the shoulder blade. The blood dripped from his shoulder. I then sprayed bleach into his remaining eye and Connor kicked him in the head. Pus and blood dripping everywhere. We run out of the motel. "Start the damn car with some freak after us," shouted Sebastian. "And Shelley is dead," replied Connor. We drove to an abandoned library and snuck in. Over the shelves we find a book labeled Gavel Town Gas Refinery Chapter 27. Disaster at the refinery. "It seems like someone intentionally ignited it," said Connor. The pages showed all burned bodies, some roasted to a crisp, a picture of someone vomiting black tar blood, and another photo of 2 people dragging a body of workers' face who had melted straight off. The following article after the pictures read, "Gas refinery explosion kills 32, 300 people still missing. July 8, 1981. It was rumored in the article that someone had put chlorine gas in one of the tanks and ignited it, setting off an explosion that left a trail of deadly gas into the town. The explosion was believed to have disturbed various nearby native burial grounds, with the respective elders extremely unhappy with this disaster. One elder was supposedly so vindictive that he cursed the land of Gavel, leading to its downfall. The time the government put Gavel off the map was 2011, 12 years ago. Someone infiltrated the refineries with chlorine gas," I said. It wasn't chlorine, Connor replied. What? We all said. The first explosion was reported in the north tank, allegedly abandoned. Yet all of the burned bodies were found in that tank. The gas looked no different to normal gas, and can be commonly produced of gasoline. Folks, what we are looking at is H2S, hydrogen sulfide. It is likely the burned bodies were already dead before the explosion, as well as the flames from the nearby well agitated and ignited the rest of the refinery plants, Connor said. How do you know this? Sebastian asked. I worked with chemicals, Connor replied. Out of all my years, I never thought it would be a bunch of goddamn kids to figure it out. An old raspy voice said as the sound of a gun cocking was ready. I quickly pulled out mine. The hell you on about, old man? Shouldn't you be working at your hotel? I asked. He laughed. I thought Vincent would have taken care of you, the guy you shot, the old man said. He's still alive and is still after you. I don't give a shit about killing him. I don't want to. We don't want anybody dead. So how about we put the guns down and talk? I asked. You think a bunch of kids like you will keep a secret? With how you spill your life stories on that TikTok and Instagram? And what's that ghost one? The old man said. Not a chance in hell I'm risking it coming out. You three will die. I don't know what came of me, but I shot the gun and he went down. Blood dripping down his leg, he dropped his gun. As he tried reaching for his gun, I stomped on his arm, hearing a bone snap. The old man was screaming in pain. We gotta get out of here, I told my friends. We ran out of the building into the foggy woods. The smoke was a radioactive green color. Then the man that attacked us earlier popped up quickly, shot him in the chest. He toppled over and fell off the hill. Blood dripping until I heard a snap. I don't know why I checked, but I wish I didn't. A piece of his clothing snagged onto a tree branch, but was too strong to snap, so the man that had attacked us earlier was limp. Blood soaking out of his chest from where I shot him, limp as a board. I told my friends to get out of here, but one of them decided to grab the book from the abandoned library about the explosion. We sped off down the road and near the local sheriff's office and exclaimed we drove past Gavel town and there was an attack, and one of our friends was dead. The sheriff looked at us and raised his eyebrows. Kids, do you know how long it's been since people lived down there? We shook our heads. 1993, finished the sheriff. We took that town off the map because people kept complaining that they were attacked by mad people. Your friend must have been murdered by the Gavel cult that sometimes uses those areas. Was one of them a very old man? I asked. You saw him? Asked the sheriff. We have been hunting him for years. Yeah, he tried to kill us, but I disarmed him in the abandoned center, I said. The following day, the bodies of Shelley and the man that attacked us were recovered. Autopsies given show that the man died of natural causes, but the old man was still alive with a broken arm. The hate in his eyes burned a memory into my brain. When I saw him being escorted by the police, he motioned with his hand, implying he will one day kill us. We drove off, never to return to Gavel Town. This is a creepy story that happened when I was 6. Let's start at the beginning. We went to Mount Adams for 4 days camping trip with my mom, little brother, Poppy, his dog, and girlfriend. We were going to camp by one of the lakes up there, but all the spots were taken. We went up the mountain a little more and found an okay spot. It was in an area where there was no trees, bushes, grass, or anything, so we could have a fire. The creepy stuff started at one of the lakes. If you've been there, you know the lakes have some drop-offs, but not a big deal. I was a good swimmer for my age. I was swimming before I could walk, so I knew to float and stuff. When we got there, I went swimming, but it was strange as soon as I got in the water. I had this feeling of dread and overwhelming fear. It wasn't my feelings, though. Thought it was someone else's. Then all of a sudden, I was under the water. I don't think I was in my body. It seems crazy, but I think I was living someone else's memory. I was underwater as if it was cold but warm at the same time. I looked up and reached for the surface, but it was too far. I couldn't breathe or cry for help. I felt tired and I gave up. I dropped my hand and let go. I was really cold and it all went black. I woke up and I was still in the same spot I was standing in, only up to my knees. I got out of the water after that, and I was scared I would see it again. When we left, we went back to the camp that night. I had the same scary feeling again. I couldn't explain it, but I was so scared, and so was my little brother, and even slept with a gun under my pillow with the clip next to it. My Poppy's dog was flipping out, and this dog was raised in the woods and saw and heard things that nobody else noticed, so we couldn't understand why he was flipping. The dinner that night wasn't much better. Bugs kept flying into it. We all went to bed, me and my mom and little brother in the tent, Poppy's girlfriend in the car, and Poppy in the hammock. It was hard, but we all fell asleep. The next morning, Poppy's girlfriend said she saw something in the sky, moving in a triangle. Then it would stop and disappear. Then it would happen again. The day we hung out under some trees about 50 yards away from us. There we felt a little scared, but not as bad. It was day, so whatever was there, we would see it. That night, the dog was flipping out, but way worse. We were afraid the dog was going to give itself a heart attack. The next morning, bright and early, we packed up and got the hell out of there. We haven't been back. Unless you like her naturalness and aliens, I don't recommend camping on Mount Adams. I always grew up watching those 80 camp slasher flicks, and always thought if I was put in a situation like that, I'd make the smart choices and escape without a scratch. I never thought I'd come face to face with my own real-life slasher moment. I am currently 25, but this experience took place when I was 20. They say being in your 20s is the time to travel and experience life to the fullest, so that's what I did. During the summer, I decided to do a solo camping trip. But like you know, rule 1, never go camping alone. I went on a trip to this place just outside of Winter Park. I found a perfect camping spot and had a 10-person tent all to myself. I planned to stay for 3 days since it was almost a day's drive from where I lived. There wasn't much around me, and the camping spot was nice. Just me and the empty forest to relax and detox from everything and everyone. Something about nature has always felt so calm, and as if the air was lighter. I have been camping since I was little, so setting everything up took maybe around 30 minutes. While I was setting up, I remember feeling uneasy, as if there was someone watching me or something from the direction of the lake, but thought nothing of it. Simply chucked it up to being paranoid because I was alone. I am a huge swimmer, so once I set up, I made my way to the lake. It was an eye shot of where my tent was, so I felt safe leaving my stuff unattended. The water was a little murky and quite deep, but it was so hot that it didn't deter me. I swam for a bit until I noticed what looked like someone standing in the tree line near my tent. I froze as I just stared to make sure I wasn't just seeing things, but my adrenaline must have kicked in because I swam back to the shore. But once my head breached the surface of the water, whoever it was now gone. I broke rule number 1 of slasher flicks, running right towards someone or something that could put me in danger. I decided to ignore it, which was really dumb, but I went on with my day. Little did I know this would be the only day that I spent there, which went against my original plan. I decided that I would make a fire and enjoy the sun. When you're camping, you have to make hot dogs over the fire at least once. I went to my cooler, but as I opened it, I had troubles finding the pack of hot dogs. I even took everything out, but my hot dogs were gone. I could have sworn I packed them. I thought nothing of it and grabbed some hamburgers I brought instead. As they were cooking, this is where things get weird. It was as if trees and twigs were moving from all directions around me. It felt as though I was being circled like prey hunts for their next meal. The bush was too thick to see much. I had to rely on what I was hearing. I should have left right then and there. The sun had set at this point, and I decided to call it a night. I remember how loud the crickets were. I had laid there for a long time until I had realized it had become dead silent. I felt sick to my stomach, as if I knew something was about to happen. I was too scared to move. I felt as though even breathing was too loud and would attract whatever was outside my tent. The silence broke with the sound of something touching the tent above my head. I stayed frozen. My first thought was probably a bear or something, even a deer. It felt eerily slow, but before I could do anything, something poked through my tent, ripping the side of the fabric, and I screamed. It wasn't intentional, but I couldn't handle it. I still wasn't sure what broke through my tent, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw a tall, dark figure on the other side of the hole in my tent. A huge hunting knife was cutting my tent effortlessly. Instantly, I rushed towards the door and unzipped it. I made sure I had my keys in my hand and booked it to the car, unlocking it as I ran. I didn't look back to see if they were following me. The ground ate rubber as I tailed out of there. The closest town was maybe 30 minutes away, and by the time I got there, I realized I didn't have my phone. Later that day, when the sun came up, I returned to pack up my stuff. Everything remained untouched, minus my tent cut to pieces and the words. Everything remained untouched, minus my tent being cut into pieces and a word cut into it. Carved into the side of my tent said, "Watching you." Laying in my tent was my phone, and when I opened it, I noticed the camera was left open. Hesitantly, I opened the camera roll, and there was one new photo. A photo of me driving off with the knife in the photo, almost like they were pointing it at the car. I never returned, and I never will. I saw aliens. I swear on everything. I have always been a believer of the unexplainable and the chance of possible life outside of our own human race. I grew up always watching people's experiences and always found it fascinating. This summer, I experienced it firsthand, and it has changed my life. Sitting outside is my favorite thing to do during the summer, especially at night. The stars are perfect to me, and they know the many secrets of the universe. I was sitting in my hammock reading The Hunger Games for the 100th time, because it is a great series. Above my book, something caught my attention. It looked like a star, but it was moving. You might say it might have been a shooting star, but the difference was this thing wasn't moving horizontally, but instead moving in straight lines, going up and down and left and right, which was odd and not normal. I lowered my book and just watched it in fascination and curiosity. After a while, I noticed it was getting lower and lower to the ground, and as it got lower to the ground, the brighter it seemed to glow. It was blinding, almost as bright as the sun, and I couldn't look away. I wondered what was driving the ship or craft and why it was here tonight. I wondered what it wanted. Could it have been the Greys that I had always heard so much about, or could it have been something different like our own government? It stayed for maybe 10 minutes until the bright light emanated from the ship and shot up, and my eyes followed it until I couldn't see it anymore. I will always be grateful for this experience, because people would do anything to experience and see something like aliens or UFOs. Maybe one day they will come back, but the next time, maybe they won't leave. Hi, my name is Charlie. I'm currently 20 years old, and I have turned 18 during the summer. When I turned 18 during the summer, I found myself on the hunt for a job. It was then that I stumbled upon a program called Camp America, offering a unique opportunity for people from the UK to venture to the United States and earn money by working in a summer camp. It didn't take much to convince me. I had never been to the United States, and the idea of experiencing it while making some money sounded like a dream come true. Several months passed and I found myself in America. I was transported to the camp where I would be working, Camp Shady Brook, nestled in the heart of Colorado. The prospect excited me. I had always been enamored by forests and mountains, a stark contrast to the relatively barren landscapes of the UK. As the days rolled on, my anticipation grew. My first night at Camp Shady Brook was a memorable one. With the arrival of the children, my duties as a counselor began in earnest. Guiding them through activities and ensuring that they had a blast made for a fulfilling day. Exhausting yet content, I retired to my own cabin as the sun dipped below the horizon, preparing to recharge for the adventures that lay ahead. I entered the dimly lit cabin. It was dark and there was no lights, so I used one of the flashlights to see. The flashlight's feeble beam cast eerie shadows on the walls. As I fumbled for the switch, a sudden chill ran down my spine. I heard faint whispers, as if carried by the wind through the trees outside. Ignoring the unease, I managed to locate a set of matches and lit a few candles around the room. their flickering light pushing back the encroaching darkness. With the cabin illuminated by the soft glow of the candles, I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched. As I settled into my sleeping bag, I heard a rustling sound coming from outside. I dismissed it as an animal and closed my eyes, hoping to drift into a peaceful sleep. But sleep proved elusive that night. Strange noises echoed through the woods, and the whispers seemed to grow louder. Eventually, I must have dozed off, but my slumber was restless and plagued by unsettling dreams. I woke up in a cold sweat, unsure if it was still night or if the morning had finally arrived. As the rays of dawn filtered through the cabin's windows, I ventured outside, hoping the light of day would dispel the lingering unease. The campgrounds, usually vibrant and bustling, felt different. The atmosphere was heavy, and there was an unnatural silence that hung in the air. The campers and fellow counselors moved about, but their movements seemed slower and almost mechanical. Over the next few days, the feeling of unease persisted. I shared my concerns with some of the other counselors, but they brushed it off as a result of adjusting to a new environment. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. Late one evening, as the sun began to set and the woods cast long shadows, I followed the source of the whispers. The voices led me deeper into the forest until I stumbled upon an overgrown path that seemed to beckon me. Against my better judgment, I walked along the path, the voices growing louder and more distinct. Suddenly, I came upon a clearing where an ancient-looking tree stood. Its twisted branches reached for the sky. Around the tree, I saw figures, ethereal and indistinct, moving in a slow, hypnotic dance. Their whispers coalesced into a haunting melody that filled the air. As I watched, transfixed, I felt a presence behind me. Turning, I saw a shadowy figure, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. It beckoned me closer, and before I knew it, I was a part of the eerie dance. Time lost all its meaning as I moved with the spectral figures, caught in a trance. It wasn't until a sudden gust of wind jolted me back to reality, and I realized the danger I was in. With the surge of willpower, I tore myself away from the dance and stumbled back down the path, the whispers fading behind me. I returned to camp, my mind in turmoil, unsure if what I had experienced was real or a hallucination. I confided in an older counselor who revealed the chilling truth. Camp Shady Brook had a dark history, an ancient legend of forbidden ritual performed by the indigenous peoples who had inhabited the land. The ritual was said to grant those who partook in it unimaginable power, but came at a terrible cost. I knew I had to leave the camp to break free from this sinister grasp. With the help of the older counselor, we devised a plan to escape during the night, when the spectral dance was likely to occur again. As we made our way through the dark woods, the whispering tried to draw us back, but we pushed forward. Finally, we reached the camp's perimeter and didn't look back until we were a safe distance away. As the first light of dawn broke through the horizon, we knew we had escaped the clutches of Camp Shady Brook. The experience forever changed me, and the constant reminder of the thin veil between the mundane and the macabre, and the darkness that can lurk beneath even the most idealistic settings. I never believed in the paranormal until I came across something absolutely terrifying. It was a dark summer night, and the sky was pitch black and covered in the stars. The only thing making the source of light were the worn-out, run-down streetlights that lit up if you were lucky. Me and my friends Brittany, Keith, Chloe, and myself, Clark, went for a walk one night. We've been wanting to explore some abandoned or possibly haunted places, but I was never much of a believer of ghosts or anything like that until I actually seen something like it. We came across one house that was pretty large. It was always in the area, but no one ever thought much about it. It was a darker gray color, with the paint starting to show its age. The windows were boarded up, and the property looked like it hadn't been taken care of in years, so we figured it was abandoned. As we walked onto the property, it kinda gave me a chill down my spine. I felt cold and a little nervous. Something didn't feel right about this place. The front of the house was as creepy as I thought. There were 2 dead trees surrounding the front. Thorn bushes covered the walkway, and there was this window that was at the top of the house. It was unboarded and dark. It felt as if there was eyes constantly watching you. Me and my friends opened the front door. It made this constant squeaking noise, like it hadn't been opened in ages. We all walked in. "Do you guys see that?" said Chloe. Everybody replied, "No." Chloe closed her eyes for a few seconds and opened them again. "It's gone. Maybe I'm losing my mind." But was she? What if she did see something? What if that's the reason why nobody comes around this place? I started to feel a lot more cold, but I'm sure it's nothing. Let's split up into 2s. I'll go with Brittany, Chloe and Keith will stick together. Sounds like a plan. Keith was excited, you could tell. He always had a thing for Chloe, but always got scared when anyone ever brought it up. Maybe he will make his move this time. We went into our pairs and split up. Me and Brittany searched the main floor. She grabbed my hand. I had never seen her this scared before. Maybe she had seen something too. "Are you okay?" I asked Brittany. "Yeah, I'm okay, I just don't know what to expect." "Yeah, me too," I said. My voice was a little shaky. The room started to get darker and Brittany let go of my hand. "Brittany, where'd you go?" I heard breathing, heavy breathing. I got closer and closer and eventually it stopped. I heard a laugh. "Brittany, is that you?" The breathing started again. I felt it this time, right on the back of my neck. Chills started to go through my body. Suddenly, the lights came back on, but Brittany still was nowhere to be seen. Keith and Chloe came back down the stairs. "Hey, you guys, nothing up?" "Chloe!" screamed Keith. Chloe was being dragged back up the stairs. Keith stood there, not knowing what to do, just shocked on what he'd just seen. It was tall, skinny. It had dark eyes like you're staring at complete emptiness. Its smile was crooked and horrifying. It was like nothing he had ever seen before. "Keith, are you all right? Where's Chloe?" "Didn't you see? It took her. She's gone, Clark." "No, we didn't see anything." I'm realizing something now. Chloe first saw something as we entered the house. Now she's gone, but only Keith's seen it. The people that can see it are its next victims. "Keith, you gotta get out of here." "Are you nuts? We need to find Chloe," Keith said in shock. "We will find her, I promise. Just please get out of here. I'll explain later." The front door slammed shut in front of our eyes. "Guys, coming down the stairs." Coming down the stairs was the figure. It crawled like it was unhuman, twitching its head as if it was watching you. It came down the stairs and stood on its 2 legs, hovering over the 3 of us, at least 8 feet tall. Its dark, unblinking eyes were terrifying. Its ghostly crooked fingers slowly pointing at the floor, carving, "This is for you, Keith." Pulling out Chloe's necklace just stained in blood. Keith slammed down on both of his knees and started shedding tears. It grabbed Keith and crawled back up the stairs, violently pulling Keith with it. Blood started to drip across his face as he hit each step going up. The figure picked up Keith and hung him on the chandelier over the doorway. I started to panic. I was freaking out. I felt like passing out, but I needed to snap out of it. "Brittany! Brittany, where are you?" I began to panic even more. "Don't worry, everything will be okay," I started to tell myself, but really I was terrified. I just lost 2 of my best friends and possibly even a 3rd. I'm scared. No, not scared. I was petrified. I laid there on the ground, unable to move. "Brittany, is that you?" Someone was standing over me, but it's too dark to see clearly who it is. "It's me, Clark. Brittany, don't worry, I'm okay. But I don't think you will." She raised the knife and tried to stab me in the leg. It missed, but barely. The knife skidded my leg a bit. I got up and started running towards the door, but the door was locked. I looked behind me in fear. Brittany was gone. Clark! Help me! I looked over, and there she was. The figure was using its finger to carve something in her arm. Believe in ghosts yet, Clark? I backed up a bit and pushed through the old squeaky door, and it broke. I started running, and running like I've never ran before. I looked back and seen nothing, just the tall grass blowing in the wind. I got home, and I bandaged myself up. Just a few cuts and scratches. I laid in bed and laid here alone for a bit until I fell asleep. The next day I went back. I walked up to the front door. Someone was sitting on the front porch. Believe in ghosts yet? It was Brittany. Hello, and thank you so much if you made it to the end of the video. If you like this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to let me know you'd like to see more content like this. If you have any stories you'd like to share that could be in a future video, make sure to head over to Reddit, or you can send it through email. My Reddit and email will be shown on the screen. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good morning, evening, or night. Bye guys!